He bought an entire failing school just to destroy it and fire everyone inside. But when a 12-year-old boy stood up to him in front of everyone, what happened next changed everything. Marcus Blackwood was everything you'd expect from a billionaire tech mogul: cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless. At 45, his silver hair was always perfectly styled. His suits cost more than most people's cars, and his piercing gray eyes had never shown mercy to anyone who stood in his way. He'd built his empire by crushing competition and buying out failing businesses, stripping them for parts, and selling off the pieces for profit. On the other side of this story was Lincoln Elementary, a small public school in the heart of Riverside, a working-class neighborhood that had seen better days. The school was over 60 years old, with peeling paint, outdated textbooks, and a heating system that barely worked in winter. But what it lacked in resources, it made up for in heart. The teachers stayed late to tutor struggling students. The principal knew every child's name, and the janitor, Mr. Rodriguez, had been there for 30 years, treating the school like his own home. Among the 400 students was Tommy Chun, a quiet 12-year-old with thick glasses and worn-out sneakers. Tommy lived with his grandmother in a tiny apartment 3 blocks from school. His parents had died in a car accident when he was 7, leaving his grandmother to raise him on her Social Security check. Despite their struggles, Tommy was brilliant, the kind of kid who devoured library books and dreamed of becoming a scientist. Lincoln Elementary wasn't just his school. It was his sanctuary, his second home, and his gateway to a better future. The trouble started when the city announced that Lincoln Elementary was on the closure list due to budget cuts and declining test scores. The community was devastated, but they had no idea that Marcus Blackwood had been watching, circling like a vulture. The school sat on prime real estate, 5 acres in a neighborhood that was slowly gentrifying. Marcus saw dollar signs where others saw a community cornerstone. But this wasn't just about money for Marcus. 3 months earlier, at an exclusive charity gala, he'd gotten into a heated argument with Dr. Sarah Martinez, the city's education superintendent. She'd publicly criticized his company's tax avoidance strategies, saying billionaires like him were part of the reason public schools were failing. "People like you wouldn't last a day try and make a real difference in education," she'd said, her words cutting deep in front of the city's elite. "You only know how to destroy, never to build." That night, Marcus made a decision that would haunt him. He would buy Lincoln Elementary, fire everyone, and prove that sometimes destruction was just good business. It would be his ultimate power move, showing the world that sentiment and community meant nothing against cold, hard cash. Marcus moved quickly and quietly, using shell companies and intermediaries. He began buying up the school district's debt. He hired expensive lawyers to find loopholes in municipal contracts and lobbied city council members with generous consulting fees. Within 6 weeks, he'd maneuvered himself into a position where the city had no choice but to sell him the school property to pay off their mounting obligations. He presented himself as a concerned citizen interested in educational reform. In meetings with city officials, he spoke eloquently about efficiency and modernization, using all the right buzzwords. He promised to maintain the school's educational mission while bringing it into the 21st century. The struggling city council, desperate for revenue and facing a budget crisis, saw him as their savior. Marcus even made a public appearance at a community meeting, wearing a humble Navy suit instead of his usual designer attire. He shook hands with worried parents and nodded sympathetically as they shared their concerns. "I understand your attachment to this institution," he said smoothly. "My goal is to preserve what works while fixing what doesn't." The community wasn't entirely convinced, but they felt powerless against the financial realities facing their neighborhood. Behind the scenes, Marcus was already drawing up termination papers for all 47 staff members and meeting with demolition contractors. He decided to tear down the school and build luxury condos, estimating a 300% return on his investment within 2 years. The sale went through on a cold Tuesday morning in November. By noon, Marcus had legally taken control of Lincoln Elementary. He arrived at 2 p.m. in his black Tesla, flanked by security guards and lawyers, ready to deliver the news that would destroy dozens of lives and shatter a community. He called an emergency assembly in the gymnasium, ordering all staff and students to attend. The confused crowd gathered, teachers whispering nervously, Students sensing something was terribly wrong, parents who'd rushed over after hearing rumors. Marcus stood at the podium, looking out at 400 frightened faces, and felt a surge of satisfaction. This was power. This was control. Effective immediately, he announced, his voice echoing to the old gymnasium. Lincoln Elementary is under new management. All current staff contracts are terminated. Students will be transferred to other district schools. This facility will be closed permanently by the end of the week. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Teachers began crying. Parents shouted in anger and disbelief. Children, not fully understanding but sensing the adults' distress, started to panic. Mr. Rodriguez, the beloved janitor, collapsed into a chair, his face gray with shock. But then, cutting through the chaos like a knife, came a small, clear voice. Why? But then, cutting through the chaos like a knife, came a small, clear voice. Why? The gymnasium fell silent. Everyone turned to see Tommy Chin standing up from his seat in the front row. At barely 5 feet tall, wearing his oversized glasses and a faded superhero t-shirt, he looked impossibly small facing the billionaire on the stage. Marcus, annoyed by the interruption, looked down at the boy dismissively. Excuse me? Tommy's voice shook, but he pressed on. I asked why. Why are you doing this to us? Marcus felt his patience snap. This was supposed to be simple. Announce the closure, leave, and never think about these people again. Business, kid. You wouldn't understand. But Tommy didn't back down. My parents died when I was 7, he said, his voice growing stronger. This school saved me. Mrs. Patterson taught me that I was smart when I thought I was stupid. Mr. Rodriguez gave me lunch when I forgot mine. Principal Williams helped my grandma fill out forms so I could get glasses. His small hands were clenching to fists at his sides. You have billions of dollars. Why do you need to take away the one thing we have? The gymnasium was dead silent now. Even Marcus's security team seemed uncomfortable. The billionaire felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Was it shame? Impossible. He'd closed hundreds of businesses, fired thousands of people. This was just another transaction. Life isn't fair, kid, Marcus said, his voice harder now. The sooner you learn that, the better. Tommy's eyes filled with tears, but his voice remained steady. My dad used to tell me that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. He said that real strength isn't about having power over people. It's about using your power to help them. He looked directly at Marcus, and for a moment, the billionaire felt like the child was seeing straight through to his soul. You could help us. You could save our school, help our teachers, make things better. But instead, you chose to hurt us. Why? What did we ever do to make you hate us so much? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus felt hundreds of eyes on him. Teachers who dedicated their lives to education, parents working multiple jobs to give their kids a chance, children whose only crime was being born into poverty. And at the center of it all was this small boy asking the one question Marcus had spent his entire adult life avoiding. Why did he choose cruelty when he could choose kindness? For the first time in decades, Marcus Blackwood was speechless. What happened next would be talked about in Riverside for years to come. Marcus stood frozen at the podium for what felt like an eternity, staring down at Tommy Chun. The boy's question echoed in his mind, dredging up memories he'd buried long ago. Memories of his own childhood in a poor neighborhood not unlike this one, of teachers who believed in him when no one else did, of the moment he decided that being rich was more important than being good. Slowly, Marcus walked down from the stage. The crowd parted nervously as he approached Tommy. The boy didn't move, didn't flinch, just looked up at the billionaire with those honest, searching eyes. What's your name? Marcus asked quietly. Tommy Chun, the boy replied. Marcus knelt down, so they were at eye level. Tommy, you just taught me something that I forgot a long time ago. His voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silent gymnasium, everyone heard every word. You're right. I could help instead of hurt. I should help instead of hurt. Marcus stood up and turned to face the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I owe you all an apology, not just for today, but for the man I've become. His voice cracked slightly. Lincoln Elementary will not be closing. Instead, I'm going to invest in it. New equipment, building repairs, higher teacher salaries, expanded programs. This school is going to become a model for what public education can be when it has proper support. The gymnasium erupted in cheers, tears, and disbelief. But Marcus wasn't finished. And Tommy, he said, looking back at the boy who changed his life in 5 minutes, I'd like to set up a college fund for you. Not because you need my charity, but because you just gave me something more valuable than all my billions. You reminded me what it means to be human. 6 months later, Lincoln Elementary was unrecognizable. The building gleamed with fresh paint. New technology filled every classroom, and a library that Tommy loved so much had tripled in size. Marcus visited every month, not as an owner, but as a volunteer, helping with math tutoring and reading programs. Tommy and Marcus became unlikely friends, the boy teaching the billionaire about empathy and community, while Marcus showed Tommy that success without compassion is just expensive failure. The school that was supposed to be demolished became a beacon of hope, proving that sometimes the smallest voices can create the biggest changes. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how much money you have or how much power you wield. What matters is what you choose to do when a child looks you in the eye and asks you to be better than you are. If you like that story and want to see more stories like that every day, then subscribe. Thank you, and until next time.